The night drapes the village in moonless darkness, even the crickets fall silent. A lone red lantern sways above a narrow dirt lane, casting trembling shadows on mud brick walls. It's as if the whole village holds its breath, sensing that something is terribly wrong. Suddenly, a dog's frantic bark shatters the stillness. Behind shuttered windows, uneasy eyes search for a sign of movement in the alley, but see nothing. When silence falls again, it's heavier than before. Under that faint lantern glow, an unspoken question hangs in the damp air: what unseen horror has slipped into our midst? I clutch my daughter's shawl to my chest, breathing in the faint scent of her. It's long past dinner time, and the rice porridge I made lies cold on the stove. She should have been home hours ago. Each time the gate rattles, my heart leaps only to find emptiness. A drizzle begins, swelling into a downpour. I grab our old lantern and step into the muddy courtyard, calling her name, May. Thunder answers in her place. Across the lane, a neighbor peers out under her porch, worry etched on her face. We share a silent, fearful glance. Nothing like this ever happens in our village, so where is my little girl? A pre-dawn phone call at my city job shattered my world. I caught the first train home, hands shaking, heart in my throat. Now dawn breaks outside the window as fields blur by. I left our village to earn money so May could have a better future. And now she's gone. My wife's sobs over the phone still ring in my ears, our daughter found by the rice fields, lifeless. If only I had been there, could I have saved her? I wipe my eyes on my sleeve, not caring who sees. With each rattle of the train, guilt gnaws deeper. How will I face our home, knowing I wasn't there when my family needed me most? Yesterday after school, I walked partway home with May. She laughed as she balanced on the narrow ledge of the irrigation canal, eager to beat nightfall. I wish I had walked her all the way back. This morning, when they found her by the old well, I pushed through the crowd and saw one of her shoes in the mud. My heart shattered. Now I'm in her quiet bedroom. Her notebooks are neatly stacked, her favorite poster still taped above the bed. Everything is unchanged, yet everything is different. I touch a photo of us grinning at last spring's festival, and my fingers tremble. How can she be gone? The guilt is a weight on my chest. Why did I ever let her walk that last stretch alone? Dawn arrived shrouded in mist as we gathered by the old well. I'm the village head, yet I felt powerless seeing May's small body on the damp ground, her school uniform splattered with mud. Mothers clutched their children, and a hush fell over everyone. Whispers broke out, who could commit such an atrocity here? I ordered the villagers to step back and wait for the police, though my voice shook. Old Mrs. John clung to my arm, asking why the spirits allowed this tragedy. I had no answer. As the sun climbed, pale and cold, I bowed my head and made a silent vow: we will find whoever did this. We must, or our village's shattered peace will never mend. I arrived with the county police as the morning fog lingered. The scene by the well was muddy from last night's rain, washing away precious evidence. Still, we found a few clues: a scrap of cloth on a thorn bush, faint drag marks. The village felt eerily still, as if even the mountains were holding their breath. All day, I interviewed villagers and pieced together what I could of May's life. She was a bright, kind girl with no known enemies. Some whisper about a stranger seen passing through last week, others cast uneasy glances at one of their own. I watched her father collapse in tears and forced myself to stay composed. I've handled crimes before, but this one feels different, personal. By dusk, lanterns glowed behind locked doors and suspicion hung in the air. How do we restore peace to a village that now fears itself? Ever since the police started sniffing around, the village has been looking at me differently. I know the gossip. I'm the odd loner who once quarreled with May's father over a field boundary. To them, that makes me a suspect. When officers asked where I was that stormy night, I told them, at home, drinking cheap beiju alone. They noted the scratches on my arm. I explained about fixing my fence, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. Now, when I walk past the market, conversations die mid-sentence. Neighbors I've known forever avoid my gaze. A child pointed at me this morning until her mother yanked her away. It's suffocating. I'm angry that someone did this and now I'm the one they blame. If they keep chasing the wrong man, the real killer is still out there somewhere, watching us turn on each other in fear. I'm only 10, and I don't really understand where my sister went. All I know is May is gone, and Mama and Papa keep crying when they think I can't hear. I found May's red hair ribbon under our bed and tied it around my wrist. It still has a few strands of her hair on it. She used to walk me to school and help me with my writing under the lamp each night. Now her side of our room is cold and empty. Sometimes I whisper her name into the darkness, hoping she'll whisper back. I don't care about catching whoever hurt her. I just want my big sister to come home. August 15th. Something feels strange these nights. I keep hearing footsteps outside my window after dark, but when I look, no one's there, only the willow tree moving in the wind. Maybe I'm just imagining things. Even our dog has been barking at shadows. I haven't told Mama because she'd worry. I'm probably being silly, but I can't shake this feeling of being watched. Mid-Autumn Festival is in 2 days, and I'm trying to focus on the excitement. I'll be helping Mama hang Chinese lanterns in the yard. I hope the bright moon and lantern light will chase away these worries. Still, every evening when I walk home, I catch myself glancing over my shoulder. I pray these are just late-night jitters that will vanish soon. I kneel before our home altar on the 7th night after May's passing. A stick of incense burns in my trembling hand, smoke curling around her framed photo. They say the departed return on this night for one last visit. I've set out her favorite steamed buns and a bowl of sweet rice porridge, offerings for her spirit. The candles flutter, casting dancing shadows on the wall. I bow low and whisper, May, if you're here, know that you are loved and missed. My knees ache on the floor, but I refuse to move. A tear slips down my cheek as the incense burns. In my heart, I pray she finds peace among our ancestors, and that we, the living, find the truth that will let her spirit rest. I stand at the front of the classroom, looking at the empty desk where May once sat. Her textbooks remain neatly stacked, a little panda keychain still hanging from her chair. The students are quiet, they keep glancing at that empty seat, then back at me with uneasy eyes. How do I, their teacher, explain something so senseless? We go through the motions of our lessons, but nothing feels normal. May was one of our brightest, maybe destined for university one day. Now that future is gone, and with it a piece of our collective innocence. There's talk in the village of installing streetlights, of parents walking children home in groups. We adapt, because we must. But when I turn to write on the board, I have to blink back tears. What can I possibly say to guide these children through a darkness even we adults barely comprehend? Every night I jolt awake from the same nightmare, the flash of lightning and May's terrified eyes in that last moment. I never meant to kill her, it was an accident, but intent means nothing now. She's gone because of me. And no one knows. I've played the part of the concerned neighbor perfectly, joining the search parties, bowing at her funeral, pretending to grieve like everyone else. But sometimes I catch the detective's gaze on me, and my blood runs cold. Does he suspect? The weight of the secret is crushing me. I can't eat, can't sleep, her face is all I see when I close my eyes. Part of me wants to confess just to end this torture, but I'm terrified of the consequences. So I remain silent, shackled by guilt. Among people I've known my whole life, I carry this monstrous truth alone. Will I ever escape these shadows, or am I damned to be haunted by May's ghost forever? I arrived in this remote village as a journalist, seeking facts, but found something deeper. Over tea, May's mother showed me a photo of her daughter beneath a blooming peach tree. The grief in her eyes was indescribable. Villagers told me quietly, "This doesn't happen here." In the city, tragedies like this become headlines and statistics. Here, a crime is a wound that may never heal. I walked the paths May once took, past terraced fields and the old banyan tree hung with faded prayer ribbons. Life here has cleaved into a before and after. I tie a new ribbon with her name onto the banyan branch, silently vowing to tell the world her story. As dusk falls and lanterns blink awake across the village, I wonder how many other quiet Chinese villages hold untold stories like this, lost in the shadows beyond the city's glow. Autumn paints the rice terraces gold, but sorrow still shrouds our days. People return to their fields, yet hurry home before dark. Doors once left open are now bolted by dusk, the trust we took for granted is gone. The police have no answers. Each week another rumor flares up, pointing at someone new. Life continues, carefully. The Mid-Autumn Festival passed quietly, families lit a few lanterns but stayed close to home. Under the old banyan tree, elders sip tea in silence, their usual stories abandoned. We try to heal by clinging to routine, but every time a branch snaps in the night wind, we jump. Our valley once knew only peace, now an undercurrent of dread runs through it. We hope that one morning we'll wake from this nightmare, but in each heart lies the fear that we never will. Night falls again, soft and eerie, a month since that fateful evening. In the silence, our village holds its breath as if waiting for something: justice, peace, an answer. We have learned how fragile safety is, how a single moment can upend our world. Yet we've also found strength in each other, a determination to endure even as fear lingers. I stand at the end of the old road where the last lantern's glow meets the darkness of the forest. My heart is heavy with everything we've lost, but a sliver of hope remains that dawn might break this endless night. So much has changed, yet one thing stays the same, gnawing at every soul left behind. Will the truth of what happened to May ever come to light, or will it remain an eternal echo in the darkness? In the pre-dawn hush of a remote Henan village, an unearthly silence prevailed where there should have been the stir of morning life. This quiet was the silence of shock. Hours earlier, a beloved neighbor had been found brutally murdered in his modest home. Blood darkened the packed earth floor, and a stick of incense still smoldered on the family altar, its thin smoke curling upward as if carrying the village's first prayers for the dead. Villagers gathered at a distance under the gray light, their faces ashen, eyes wide with disbelief. In this peaceful Chinese countryside, where life had long followed the gentle rhythms of season and tradition, such violence was something alien, a nightmare that now trespassed into reality. Veteran officers from the local public security bureau stood grim and bewildered as they combed the scene for clues. This village had rarely seen crime beyond a petty theft or a neighborly dispute, now they faced a level of savagery that left even hardened policemen pale. In the doorway, the victim's widow sobbed uncontrollably, her trembling hands clutching an old photograph of her husband, until gentle neighbors led her away. What could have driven someone to such merciless violence? The small home, humble and undisturbed aside from the signs of struggle, offered no clear motive. Money lay untouched on a shelf, and the victim had no known quarrels. The police found themselves asking a chilling question they'd never voiced in this quiet farming community: was this an act of random, senseless brutality? Throughout the day, investigators scoured the village for any glimmer of an explanation. They moved door to door under the mournful gaze of hanging laundry and paper lanterns, asking if anyone had seen a stranger or heard anything in the night. Most had slept soundly through the darkness. Only one farmer recalled his dog barking furiously around midnight, a barking that ceased abruptly. At the crime scene, clues were frustratingly scarce. A single set of muddy footprints led away from a back window and disappeared at the main road, their size so large it made the officers exchange puzzled glances. The pattern of wounds on the victim's body was equally perplexing, vicious yet oddly deliberate, as if inflicted by someone eerily calm in their fury. With no clear motive or suspect, a sense of unease settled over the village like a storm cloud. If this wasn't personal vengeance or robbery, then what was it? Barely a fortnight had passed when violence struck again, this time in a village only a few miles away. On a moonless night, a young couple returning from a family visit vanished along a quiet country road. By dawn, their bodies were discovered in a roadside ditch, beaten and left entwined in death's cold embrace. The brutality mirrored the first murder, the same cruel frenzy tempered with an eerie meticulousness. Once more, nothing of value was stolen, a purse full of money lay spilled beside them, untouched. When word of this second atrocity reached the first village, terror took hold. Doors that were once left ajar until midnight were now bolted shut at sundown. Neighbors spoke of a killer in their midst, a faceless predator who moved under cover of darkness, striking without warning or reason. The authorities could no longer treat these as isolated horrors. In an emergency meeting at the county police headquarters, maps were unrolled and the two attack sites circled in red ink. The officers spoke in tense, lowered voices, grappling with the unthinkable: a serial killer was prowling their rural heartland. At the second crime scene, the investigators had found the same telltale clue, those impossibly large footprints confirming that one individual's shadow lay over both tragedies. Messages were dispatched to neighboring villages and provinces, urging them to report any similar unsolved cases. In hushed conversations, some officers admitted this kind of predator was something they only knew from foreign crime novels or distant city rumors. Yet now it was undeniably real and terrifyingly close. A pattern was taking shape, drawn in blood and fear, and everyone understood that if this killer was not caught, he would strike again. As the investigation deepened, so did the urgent need to understand the killer's mind. To catch a monster, the detectives knew they had to grasp his thoughts, his impulses, his darkness. In quiet moments, some wondered if they were dealing with a madman driven by delirium, or a cold and calculating soul enacting a personal vendetta against the world. The meticulous care in covering his tracks, those oversized shoes, the lack of witnesses suggested a frightening level of self-awareness. This was no mere berserk fury, it was controlled, deliberate evil. What trauma or twisted logic could fuel such cruelty? In Chinese culture, harmony and respect for life are deeply valued, making the existence of someone who kills for no reason even more baffling. Perhaps, the investigators mused, the killer saw himself as beyond the bounds of society, nursing an invisible wound and lashing out at anyone who crossed his shadow. The thought that such a person could smile and walk among them unnoticed by daylight was profoundly unsettling. It meant the darkness they hunted was not some mythical beast, but a human being who had utterly lost his way. True to the investigators' fears, the killer struck again. This time his cruelty invaded a place of solace. On the outskirts of yet another village, an old Buddhist temple stood among ancient cypress trees, a sanctuary where villagers prayed for protection. It was there, beneath the temple's curved eaves and faded paintings of guardian deities, that a new victim was found. A local farmer, who had gone in the evening to light incense for his departed ancestors, now lay lifeless on the stone steps. The flicker of prayer candles cast long shadows over the scene of blood. Not even the sacred grounds had dissuaded the murderer. If anything, this boldness, killing in so hallowed a place, deepened the community's dread. To many, it felt as though a malevolent force was mocking everything they held sacred, tearing through the very heart of their culture and faith. In the wake of this third atrocity, the community's fear reached a fever pitch, but so did their unity. Villagers from miles around converged at the old temple the next evening, not to defy the killer but to support one another in grief. They lit candles and placed white chrysanthemums on the steps where blood had been scrubbed away, their soft prayers and Buddhist chants drifting into the night air. Under the gentle gaze of stone lions at the temple gate, they vowed silently to stay strong. Ancient protective charms were hung on doorways and red lanterns left burning through the night as symbols of light against the darkness. Parents no longer let their children stray even a few paces. Farmers formed volunteer patrols, walking the village perimeters with stout sticks and flashlights, determined not to let another neighbor fall prey without a fight. In this collective resistance, part spiritual, part practical, there was a glimmer of hope. The killer had sown terror, but he had also unwittingly sown solidarity. Meanwhile, law enforcement escalated their efforts to an unprecedented level for this quiet region. A special task force was formed, drawing officers from across Henan and neighboring provinces. In a bustling makeshift command center at the county seat, detectives pinned maps and crime scene photos to bulletin boards, drawing lines between villages as if connecting the dots of a sinister constellation. Patterns emerged. The killer struck on moonless or stormy nights, choosing isolated victims caught alone. Each scene lay not far from a main road or railway, suggesting he arrived and fled quickly, perhaps a drifter slipping from one place to the next. Forensic teams, now aided by experts from the provincial capital, re-examined every fragment of evidence. They found that at each crime scene, the killer left almost nothing of himself, no fingerprints, no identifiable DNA. It was as if a ghost committed the deeds. Yet, there were clues in his methods. The same kind of blunt force trauma appeared each time, indicating he favored a particular weapon, maybe a hammer or metal bar, and wielded it with grim efficiency. Investigators also quietly checked hospitals for any mentally disturbed or violent individuals released in recent years and scrutinized reports of similar crimes nationwide, fearing that their murderer might have struck elsewhere before. With each passing day, the file on the case thickened, and so did the determination of those hunting this phantom. By now, a clearer picture of the predator himself was forming in the minds of the detectives. He was likely a man in his prime, strong and stealthy, perhaps familiar with the region's back roads and footpaths. The careful avoidance of witnesses and lack of fingerprints hinted at prior experience with crime, maybe a drifter with a record, or someone who had learned to kill methodically. His choice of victims seemed chillingly random: a middle-aged farmer, a young couple, a temple-goer. There was no obvious link between them, no shared age or gender or personal connection. This randomness told investigators that the motive wasn't in the victims at all, but in the killer's own turmoil. Some on the team theorized about his psyche. Perhaps he felt wronged by life, humiliated or heartbroken, and now exacted vengeance on the world at large. With each murder, he might be feeding a twisted sense of power or quelling an inner anguish. One detective, poring over photos, noticed a curious detail repeated in each case file. A scrap of red cloth had been found at all three scenes, overlooked at first, but now clearly deliberate, as if the killer left a tiny signature in the color of blood. It was a taunt, a puzzle piece to his identity. Moreover, the timing between attacks was shortening, like a drum beat accelerating. His boldness at the temple suggested growing confidence. The task force knew that as the killer became more emboldened, he might also grow more careless or more dangerous. They steeled themselves with a grim resolve. They were not just solving crimes now, they were in a race against this man's escalating fury, and every insight into his mind was a step closer to stopping him. That winter, as frost bit the fields, the killer's rampage nearly met its match. Late one evening, in a hamlet already on high alert, a chorus of panicked shouts and the crash of a broken door shattered the silence. A village night patrol, 5 men carrying stout poles and flashlights, sprinted toward the cries. They burst into a dimly lit farmhouse to a scene of terror, a family cowering in a corner and a dark-clad intruder looming over them with a raised iron rod. Upon seeing the patrol, the assailant snarled like a cornered animal and bolted into the night. The villagers gave chase through the narrow lanes and frozen rice paddies, hearts pounding. For a few breathless moments, they caught the silhouette of a man against the starry sky, his breath visible in the cold air, before he slipped into a dense grove of bamboo and vanished. In the chaotic stillness that followed, the would-be victims sobbed in relief and horror. The killer had escaped yet again, but this time, he had been seen. The ghost was flesh after all, and he had nearly been caught under the collective courage of ordinary people uniting against him. The near miss in that farmhouse proved to be a turning point. At dawn, investigators swarmed the village, interviewing the shaken family and their brave neighbors who intervened. The survivors described the assailant in frantic detail. He wore a dark jacket and cap, wielded an iron rod, and had eyes that glinted with a terrifying resolve. Crucially, the young man who had chased him noted that the fugitive was of average height and build, far from the giant one might have imagined from the size of those earlier footprints. This confirmed what some detectives suspected: the killer had been employing deception, like oversized shoes, to mask his true form. In his panicked escape, the murderer had even abandoned his weapon. The heavy iron bar, now bent and smeared with the victim's blood, was recovered from the roadside where he'd tossed it. At last, the police held a piece of physical evidence crafted by the killer's own hand. Forensic teams hurried it to a lab, hopeful that a fingerprint, a trace of skin, or even a speck of rust unique to a certain factory might bring them closer to a real identity. For the first time since the terror began, the tide seemed to be turning. The killer had been seen, confronted, and made to flee like a fox before the hounds. He was still out there, wounded in pride if not in body, and the authorities knew he would be desperate and dangerous. But now, they too had a taste of hope. The darkness was no longer faceless, and they were determined that the next time they met this adversary, the outcome would be very different. In the days that followed, a subtle shift occurred in the emotional landscape of the region. The villages still bore the scars of terror. Families slept restlessly, children cried out from nightmares of faceless shadows, but now those fears were tempered by a newfound resolve. There was an almost palpable sense that the nightmare could be challenged and eventually ended. Elders who had been praying for divine intervention began to speak of yin and yang, the balance between darkness and light. The killer's brutality was the darkest yin, and the courageous unity of ordinary people was the opposing yang, struggling to restore harmony. The entire community had been forced to confront the very worst of human nature, and in doing so they rediscovered the best of it as well. A young patrolman, reflecting on the night of the chase, remarked quietly to a friend that he had never believed he could face down a killer, and yet he did, fueled by love for his neighbors. Stories like his spread, reminding everyone that amidst unspeakable evil, acts of bravery and solidarity shone like lanterns in the night. Even the lead investigator, a grizzled officer who had seen violence before but nothing like this, allowed himself a moment of hope. He whispered a small prayer of gratitude that fate had spared that family and given them a glimpse of their adversary. It was a sign, he felt, that no matter how ruthless this man was, he was ultimately human and could be brought to justice. That belief became a quiet mantra for all involved. The darkness would not last forever. Dawn was coming, slowly but surely. On the investigative front, patience and persistence were finally paying off. The forensic lab's analysis of the dropped weapon yielded a precious clue, a partial fingerprint, one not belonging to any victim. When this fragment of a whirl and ridge was run through the National Criminal Database, investigators held their breath. Within seconds, the computer pinged with a match. A single name lit up the screen, a name already known to police for past transgressions. The room fell silent as the realization set in: the faceless killer now had an identity. Shock and a grim vindication washed over the task force. Quickly, they pulled the man's file, prior arrests, a history of violence, perhaps even a photograph. Details that had been abstract theory were now concrete facts: age, hometown, known associates. It felt surreal that this ghost who had haunted their nightmares was in reality just a man, with an ordinary record and a traceable past. Calls were placed in rapid succession, special police units assembled to prepare for an arrest. As dawn light filtered through the dusty office windows, the lead detective pinned the suspect's photo to the center of their evidence board. The pattern of brutality that had emerged over these months had finally led them here. Each red thread of string connecting crime scene to crime scene now converged on this one individual. In his twisted compulsion to kill again and again, the murderer had unwittingly given himself away. The hunt was entering its final phase, driven now by a renewed energy. No longer were they searching in the dark. They had a name and a face, and the inevitable reckoning was drawing near. The net was cast, and it was only a matter of time before the killer's freedom ran out. Acting on the suspect's profile, police units fanned out to his last known addresses and haunts. One team raided a dingy rented room on the outskirts of a small town where he'd once lived. Inside they found only peeling walls and a few discarded belongings: a torn jacket, some food wrappers, and the lingering smell of stale tobacco. He had been there, possibly only days before, but now he was on the move. Wanted posters with his photograph were circulated to every train station, bus depot, and border checkpoint across the region. Officers questioned long-distance bus drivers and ticket sellers, showing the man's picture and asking if a lone, nervous traveler had passed through. Tension hung heavy over the manhunt. Everyone knew a cornered killer could lash out again. Undercover detectives loitered in transit hubs and markets, eyes scanning crowds for a face that no longer could hide behind anonymity. They were determined to find him before he could slip away into the vastness of China or claim another victim in desperation. The trap was set. All they needed now was for their target to make a mistake. That mistake came sooner than anyone expected. Only a week into the nationwide hunt, a young police officer stationed at a long-distance bus terminal in a neighboring province spotted a familiar face. The man buying a ticket at the counter had the same hollow eyes and gaunt cheeks as the fugitive in the wanted poster tucked in the officer's pocket. Fighting back a surge of adrenaline, the officer casually radioed for backup, then continued to observe from afar. The suspect seemed tired, his clothes dirty and his demeanor anxious as he clutched a small bag. Unaware that he'd been recognized, he stepped out to the bus base. As he moved toward a just-arrived bus bound for what he hoped was freedom, plainclothes police quietly encircled the area. In a flash of authoritative shouts and drawn guns, the terminal erupted into chaos. Passengers screamed and ducked behind benches. The killer froze, realization flooding his face. For an instant, his eyes darted around like a trapped wolf's, searching for an escape. But there was none. Dozens of officers converged, and with surprising swiftness, he was wrestled to the ground. Handcuffs clapped onto his wrists, ending a months-long reign of terror in a few decisive seconds. The hunt was over. In the moments after the arrest, a heavy silence fell over the bus station. The killer, now just a man pinned to the cold concrete, no longer looked like the monster of everyone's nightmares. He was winded, powerless, face pressed against the ground as officers quickly frisked and hauled him up. Onlookers peered from their hiding places, eyes wide in astonishment that this thin, unremarkable-looking individual had caused so much pain. The man's chest heaved as he caught his breath. He cast a gaze around at the ring of uniforms and plainclothes officers encircling him. In that gaze there was no remorse, only a strange mix of defiance and emptiness. One detective who had flown in from Henan stepped forward, heart pounding with a mix of triumph and anger. This was the face that had haunted his dreams. The detective's hands trembled slightly as he restrained himself from yelling the questions that had haunted them all. Why? How could you? But the moment for confrontation would come later. For now, the priority was to secure this man and bring him back to face justice in the very communities he had scarred. As they led the handcuffed killer away under heavy guard, the first flakes of snow began to drift down in the winter morning light. Nature itself seemed to exhale. What had been unthinkable hours ago was now reality. The predator was captured, and the long night of fear was finally over. News of the capture spread like wildfire. By the time the police convoy crossed back into the Henan countryside with the killer in custody, word had already reached the villages he'd terrorized. People poured into the streets despite the chill, gathering in huddles to share the unbelievable news: the nightmare man was caught. As the police cars passed, some villagers applauded quietly, others simply stood in tears of relief. At the station house, the murderer was escorted into a cell under the unflinching glare of lawmen who had spent countless sleepless nights pursuing him. Under interrogation, he spoke little at first, just a name, confirming what they already knew. His voice was flat, emotionless. When pressed about his crimes, he offered a chilling, indifferent explanation. Life had been cruel to him, he said softly, so he in turn was cruel to anyone life placed before him. He described his own suffering with the same vacant detachment as he described taking lives, as if pain had long ago burnt out any humanity inside him. Investigators sat in that interrogation room, listening in grim silence. It was almost more disturbing to hear the killer's reasoning in his own words than to see the crimes he committed. Yet, amid the horror of his confession, there was clarity. The pattern of brutality they had worked so hard to decipher was born from a miserable fusion of rage and emptiness. Knowing this did not forgive the atrocities, but it did end the mystery. The faceless shadow now had a story, a pathetic and horrifying one, and, most importantly, it would never be free to harm again. In the days that followed, the region began its slow process of healing. The killer's capture brought an immense sense of relief, but also a profound sorrow for the lives that could not be returned. Funeral rites that had been postponed in fear were now held with proper honor and closure. Families of the victims gathered with neighbors in remembrance, burning incense and joss paper so that the departed might find peace in the afterlife. In the evenings, the temple that had seen such horror became a place of solace once more. Villagers lit lanterns and offered prayers of thanks beneath its eaves. There was grief, yes, and it ran deep. Children who lost parents, spouses left alone, an entire community's innocence stolen. But there was also a resilient hope taking root. Parents no longer kept their children locked indoors, though they still imparted lessons learned, to be cautious, to care for one another, and to never take peace for granted. The scar on this community would not disappear, but it would, in time, fade. The story of the murders and the eventual triumph of justice would be told and retold, not to spread fear, but to remind the next generation of both the fragility and strength of the human spirit. Life, slowly and quietly, found its way back to normal in those villages. The rice shoots greened in the paddies come spring, markets bustled again, laughter cautiously returned to the lanes where silence once reigned. The darkness that had descended upon them was gone, chased away by collective bravery and unwavering perseverance. Looking back on those harrowing months, a paradox emerged. The very pattern of brutal attacks that had brought so much anguish had also revealed the strength and solidarity of ordinary people. The case entered local lore, a cautionary tale wrapped in a testament of resilience. In this final reflection, one might recall a line of ancient wisdom: the heavens may be slow to judge, but they do not overlook. In the end, justice, though delayed, had prevailed. The serial killer who once wandered among quiet villages, unseen and unimagined, was now behind bars awaiting the verdict of a court and the judgment of history. His spree of terror had ended not just through dogged police work, but through the collective will of a community that refused to surrender to fear. As the last winter snow melted and plum blossoms began to bloom across the Chinese countryside, life moved forward. The fields were tilled again under a hopeful sun, children raced one another along dusty roads, and old friends resumed their evening chats by warm hearths. The memory of the lost lingered like incense smoke in the air, visible for a while, then gently dissipating, never forgotten but no longer overpowering. From tragedy, the community had forged unbreakable bonds and hard-earned wisdom. And as night fell once more over Henan, lantern light glowed in the windows of homes that could finally sleep in peace, the long nightmare over at last. In a remote Chinese village nestled within Henan's rolling hills, Qiu Qianquoc was born into a world of hardship and silence. His childhood home, a modest wooden dwelling surrounded by dense bamboo groves, held echoes of pain more than laughter. The boy's eyes, dark and guarded, reflected a soul already weathered beyond his years. Qiu's father was a man feared not just for his towering frame but for his merciless temper. In the dim interior of their Chinese farmhouse, the harsh voice of a father echoed through worn wooden beams, while young Qiu flinched, shrinking into shadows. Physical punishment was frequent, leaving bruises unseen by the world but seared into memory. His mother, a fragile woman worn down by years of toil and sorrow, could offer little refuge. Her silent tears mingled with the smoke from the cracked clay stove, a quiet witness to the family's unraveling. The warmth that should have nurtured a child's spirit was replaced by cold neglect and fear. Yet in his youth, Qiu showed moments of quiet brilliance. His keen gaze often lingered on the distant horizon as other children played. But the world he observed was one of exclusion, where affection was scarce and expectations harsh. Beneath his silence, anger simmered like a slow-burning fire. Adolescence brought no relief. Kyu turned to alcohol and substances, numbing the ache of isolation and pain. The village whispered of the boy with bloodshot eyes who vanished into the night, returning with a stony gaze that scared even the bravest neighbors. Stories of his violent outbursts became common fistfights in local taverns, arguments that ended with shattered pots and broken bonds. Kyu was drifting, neither embraced by family nor community, a man forging his path through bitterness and resentment. Family fractured beyond repair. His parents' acrimonious disputes carved deep wounds, while siblings watched in helpless silence. The fragile threads that might have held Kyu's world together were severed, leaving him untethered in a sea of anger. Socially, Kyu was an outcast never fully belonging, always watched with suspicion. The weight of rejection grew heavier with each passing year, twisting his view of the world into one where survival meant dominance, not connection. Psychologists who later studied Kyu's profile identified classic markers of antisocial personality disorder: impulsivity, manipulativeness, and a chilling absence of empathy. These traits, unchecked and fueled by trauma, had hardened into dangerous weapons. Before the killings, Kyu's criminal record was modest petty thefts, disturbances, minor infractions that, in hindsight, were ominous warnings dismissed by an overwhelmed system ill-equipped to intervene. Kyu's decision to adopt the guise of a monk was a calculated act of deception. Clad in worn saffron robes, he moved through villages with an air of piety, exploiting the deep respect Chinese culture holds for spiritual figures. Victims were chosen not for personal grievance but for what they symbolized: innocence, trust, faith. Each attack was a violent repudiation of the community's core values, a psychological assault on the very soul of those he terrorized. Kyu's dual existence, monk by day, predator by night, revealed a fractured psyche capable of compartmentalization and chilling duplicity. It was this mask of sanctity that shielded him, deepening the community's betrayal when the truth emerged. The breach of trust reverberated beyond individuals, shaking faith in institutions meant to protect and guide. The community's shock morphed into grief and rage, emotions that would shape their path toward healing. Ultimately, Kyu Qianquo's tragic arc is a haunting reminder: unresolved trauma, social neglect, and unchecked pathology can forge monsters hidden in plain sight. It challenges society to look deeper and act before darkness consumes another soul. As the chilling wave of violence spread through the Chinese province of Henan, law enforcement in Kamjo faced a battle far beyond routine crime solving, unweaving a tangled web woven from fear, silence, and shadows. Reports trickled in, fragmented and fearful. Witnesses trembled behind closed doors, victims' voices muffled by trauma. Forensic evidence was scarce, often compromised by the region's rugged mountains and shifting weather. Gathering reliable testimony became a delicate dance. Villagers balanced between fear of retaliation and desire for justice, their faces etched with hesitation as they whispered truths under flickering lantern light. Early investigation efforts often met frustrating dead ends. Rain-soaked evidence washed away, wildlife disturbed crucial clues, and time eroded the fragile trail toward justice. Despite setbacks, forensic teams persevered. Under harsh fluorescent lights, scientists meticulously examined trace fibers and faint DNA fragments, piecing together a cold mosaic that whispered of a methodical predator. Simultaneously, investigators worked to assemble a portrait of the suspect from scattered witness accounts: a man in monk's robes, familiar yet elusive, casting a shadow of mistrust across communities. Contradictions soon surfaced. Some witnesses painted conflicting images, voices faltering under pressure. The mosaic of narratives blurred edges, complicating the task of profiling a man who thrived on deception. Inside the investigation, tension simmered. Some urged rapid arrests to calm public fear, others warned that haste might sacrifice justice, deepening wounds rather than healing them. The lack of advanced technology and limited resources in this remote corner of China became a glaring obstacle. Communication gaps and forensic limitations slowed the pursuit of truth, stretching the patience of all involved. Gradually, patterns crystallized: the careful selection of victims, a ritualistic modus operandi, and the cunning use of religious disguise to evade suspicion, revealing a predator with cold calculation. At the heart of this relentless pursuit lay a precarious balance, maintaining the fragile trust of a frightened community while rigorously chasing leads often entangled in cultural and spiritual sensitivities. Interviews with local monks and temple staff revealed a shared unease. Some suspected something was amiss but hesitated, caught between fear and reverence, unwilling to break sacred silence. As evidence slowly mounted, cracks appeared in the legal process. Defense attorneys seized on inconsistencies and challenged forensic methods, sparking fierce debates over truth and procedure. These disputes underscored deeper systemic struggles: a justice system at the crossroads of tradition and modernity, grappling with the complexities of high-profile rural crimes. Yet, through every obstacle, the investigative team's resolve remained unshaken. Late nights fueled by determination gradually lifted the fog of fear, inching ever closer to unveiling the truth. Reflection reveals that solving such entrenched evil requires more than law enforcement. It demands cultural understanding, community empowerment, and advances in forensic science working hand in hand. As the investigation gained momentum, a haunting question lingered in the mountain air: would justice arrive before darkness claimed another innocent life? The heavy doors of the Chinese courthouse creaked open, ushering in a moment charged with tension and sorrow. The trial of Vuong Dongfang gripped the hearts of millions, a nation waiting with bated breath for justice to be served. Clad in tattered monk's robes, the accused sat motionless, eyes cold and unreadable, a chilling contrast to the grief and fury etched on the faces of those seeking justice. The prosecution's opening statements struck like thunder, painting a vivid portrait of a merciless predator who betrayed sacred trust to unleash unspeakable horrors. In response, the defense sought to unravel the threads of certainty, spotlighting inconsistencies in witness testimonies and questioning the forensic evidence, appealing to the reverence for monks in Chinese culture as a plea for tempering judgment. Outside the courthouse, a media frenzy erupted, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions, each headline shaping the nation's collective conscience, fueling debate and outrage. The trial became a mirror reflecting the fractures within society, passions ignited over faith, justice, and the fragile balance between mercy and retribution. Testimonies from survivors and family members pierced the courtroom's silence, voices trembling yet resolute, weaving a tapestry of pain, courage, and a demand for accountability. The defense humanized the accused, unveiling a troubled past shadowed by mental illness, yet the courtroom's atmosphere left little room for sympathy in the face of such heinous crimes. Legal scholars across China publicly debated the complexities: how to balance long-standing legal traditions with the raw emotional weight of brutality faced in this case. The question of capital punishment ignited fierce arguments, some demanding harsh justice, others warning against the irreversible finality and the moral dilemmas it carries. Social media exploded into a battleground of public sentiment, hashtags trending, heartfelt posts flooding Chinese platforms, and widespread calls for legal reform and better protection for women. Voices rose to challenge the fairness of the trial, highlighting procedural missteps and concerns that public pressure might sway judicial independence. Despite controversy and debate, the verdict was unambiguous. Vuong Dongfang found guilty on all charges, sentenced to death by shooting, a sentence that brought a somber closure and lingering questions. Outside, families of victims found a flicker of solace amid their grief, while society collectively grappled with the enormity of lost lives and the urgent need to prevent future tragedies. This trial underscored the fragile balance between justice and mercy, law and emotion, a profound reminder of the heavy burden borne by judicial systems confronting the darkest corners of human nature. As the courtroom emptied, a nation was left to ask, how does a community rebuild trust shattered by betrayal? What lessons must endure to guard generations yet to come? To truly understand the darkness that consumed Vuong Dongfang, we must peer into the labyrinth of his mind, a maze shadowed by trauma, isolation, and twisted desires. Born into a turbulent rural family, Fang's early life was marked by violence, a harsh father whose anger was a constant storm, and a mother trapped in quiet suffering. This violent soil planted seeds of rage that would later grow into monstrosity. Childhood abuse does not excuse crimes, but it offers a glimpse into how pain can warp a young mind, bending empathy into cruelty, transforming sanctuary into a prison of fear. Psychologists call this the cycle of violence, where victims of cruelty risk becoming perpetrators themselves, trapped in a relentless nightmare without intervention. Fang's choice to adopt the guise of a monk was more than deception, it was a symbolic cloak, masking inner turmoil beneath the outward image of holiness, mocking a community's trust in spiritual guides. Such duplicity reveals a fractured identity, part manipulator, part lost soul, wielding faith both as a shield to hide behind and a weapon to wound. His crimes bore the mark of chilling calculation, victims selected opportunistically, sacred temples and remote paths exploited to evade suspicion and capture. Beneath the cold violence lay deeper psychological fractures, untreated mental illness, profound social isolation, and wounds of trauma left unhealed. Criminal profiling experts recognize traits common to such offenders: antisocial personality, impulsivity, lack of remorse, and a burning rage fueled by feelings of powerlessness. Fang's occasional charm and manipulation allowed him to gain trust, even admiration in some circles, a chilling hallmark of a sociopath hiding in plain sight. This duality, the mask of sanity, enabled him to move undetected for years, deepening the wounds of a community shattered by betrayal. From a societal lens, Fang's case reveals systemic failings, gaps in mental health support, stigmas that silence suffering, and a lack of community vigilance allowing darkness to flourish. Early intervention, education, and destigmatizing mental illness are not just ideals, they are essential shields against the birth of future tragedies. Understanding Fang's mind does not excuse his actions, but it arms society with insight, a compass to detect warning signs and protect the vulnerable before it is too late. As we reflect, we are reminded, justice must be paired with compassion, prevention must walk hand in hand with accountability, only then can cycles of violence be broken. As this harrowing chapter closes, we pause to reflect, not only on the darkness unleashed, but on the fragile threads that bind a community, delicate yet unbreakable. Violence such as this fractures more than flesh, it shatters trust, safety, and the very soul that weaves a community together. Yet, From the depths of tragedy rises the possibility of healing, if only we dare to face uncomfortable truths and embrace change. The wounds inflicted demand more than punishment, they call for awareness, education, and compassion rooted in purposeful action. Prevention begins with recognizing early warning signs, isolation, silent suffering, and the hidden cries beneath anger and violence. Community vigilance must walk hand in hand with accessible mental health support, breaking stigmas, and nurturing resilience. Education, especially among the young, is vital, planting seeds of empathy, respect, and empowerment to stand against violence. To survivors and victims, we owe not only justice but a promise, to create a world where safety is a right, not a privilege. Our silence can be as harmful as violence itself. Speaking out, sharing stories, and supporting one another can break the cycles of fear and despair. In the end, justice must be more than law, it must be a call to courage, a daily choice to reject complacency and nurture hope. The path to a safer society is long and arduous, but each step forward honors those lost and protects those yet to come. Let this story be a catalyst, not only for justice served but for transformation embraced, a phoenix rising from the ashes of tragedy. Remember the faces, remember the lives, so their suffering was not in vain, but a beacon guiding us toward a more compassionate future. And above all, remember this, each of us holds the power to build communities rooted in trust, respect, and unwavering care. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your voice can help spread awareness and inspire change. Join the conversation below. Share your thoughts, your stories. Together, let us be the change this world so desperately needs. Together, we can build a world where safety, dignity, and justice are not distant hopes but everyday realities.